Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40K Necrons. Now in today's video I thought I'd take another break from the faction focuses we're doing. I might even knock that on the head, you know, because we're getting closer to 10th edition now and I'd rather get into the more nitty gritty stuff, all the roles and all that kind of jazz, and relate it to Necrons in fact. And you can see already that I'm itching because I've got hay fever. It's that time of the year, so you'll probably see me doing that throughout the video. But for today's video in fact I want to go through the key changes for 10th edition, how it's going to relate to Necrons in particular, and kind of give the positives and negatives to these key changes. Most of it is positive, to be fair. Always is when you're at the start of the edition, when we haven't actually play tested the game, so therefore we haven't broke the game just yet, but I'm sure there'll be a stage where we do actually break the game. So let's kick this thing off with universal rules and keywords. So there's a lot of universal keywords, a lot of universal rules now. A lot of people would suggest that that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think we had it a few editions ago, but it got a little bit too messy. There was too many universal rules, and at the end of that edition, everyone seemed to just have every single rule going. They have now added these universal rules such as feel no pain, which we all use that sort of phrase anyway, but they didn't actually have it in the core rulebook for 9th edition. Things such as deep strike is now an actual term, so I kind of like the idea of that rather than having a faction specific name or phrase for deep strike, which just means the same thing but a different word for every faction. I kind of didn't like that idea, so they've streamlined it: deep strike, feel no pain, etc. They've also added all these keywords for weaponry. Now I think there's quite a lot, and even though they're fairly straightforward, when we're relating them to units, I'm not entirely sure that we're going to grasp how effective a unit is until we started playing out. Now, I know that sounds really obvious, but when you give a unit, say, I don't know, in fact, given an army, an entire faction, sustain hits 1, for example, we don't fully know, or we're not fully aware of how that's going to turn one unit from, in a 9th edition unit, given these certain keywords, how they're going to change. Is it going to dilute the flavour of that unit? Is it going to make them more of a key unit in the game? We need to wait and see on that. But as for the actual number of keywords, I think there's quite a lot. And I mean, I've got a photo for you here. There's all these keywords. This isn't just the weapons. It in fact has all the keywords for the rules as well. But there's quite a lot to get our head around. Now, of course, as the edition starts to go in and we start playing the game, of course, these are going to be really common to us. I mean, they're already quite common as they are, but some of them are quite similar. For example, getting critical hits with lethal hits. You can get critical hits with precision hits. You can get critical hits with sustain hits. There's lots of different things that relate to rolling a 6 to hit as well as rolling a 6 to wound. So we're just going to get our head around that. And if you are a fairly new player, or just a player that isn't, that deep into the game, this may sort of go over your head a little bit. Obviously, if you're more of a competitive player and you've been around the block a few times, this will be a piece of it, really. This should be alright. But overall, if I was to sort of give this as a positive or a negative, it's quite positive. I think it's definitely positive. So next is datasheets. The datasheets have been massively polished off. They are much more improved. They're much more presentable. I really like the way they are presented. It's just clearer. They've now got the ballistic skill and weapon skill in the right place, so therefore it's just easy to read. You've got no -1s a hit, +1s a hit and all that jazz. It's just there in print, black and white, and it's very easy to do. We've got a couple of changes to the main stats. The objective control is the main stat here. That's changed. It's a new one. No more is there going to be this nonsense where you've got, one Space Marine troop going up against, 10 Lich Guard, yet the Space Marine troop has got objectives secured, so therefore they've got the objective. No more is that going to happen because objective control is model by model, so therefore it's going to make much more sense for the game. Now, how does that relate to Necrons? Well, we used to play the Nihilak Dynasty as the main dynasty for 9th edition, I believe. Not everybody, of course. Some people were playing the Novak Dynasty, the Zerican Dynasty, but the main one for most players competitively was objective secured dynasties such as the Nihilak Dynasty or Eternal Conquerors. And that was the way we won. That was the way we scored points, the way we won. That isn't a thing anymore. So we're going to have to now earn our success in a different way, whether it's being more aggressive or just being more tactical with our objective control. Now, that is one of the new stats, which I do like that change, to be honest with you. It just makes more sense. They've also changed the leadership, which also relates to Battleshock, which is about the next topic, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, overall the presentation of the datasheet is a very good thumbs up from me. Okay, next is Battleshock. This, at first glance, I thought this wasn't going to be that big of a deal. When we saw the Tyranid and Space Marine release, which were the first articles in the Warhammer community releases, it didn't look like a big thing, and I was like, well, that's not a very good ability. You're just going to force Battleshock on a unit, whatever, right? It's just a morale test. Well, after seeing everybody's articles, well, most of the factions' articles, I'm realising Battleshock is going to be huge for 10th edition. We're going to be thinking about it all the time, because as soon as you fail a Battleshock test, your objective control goes to 0, which of course that's going to affect your, scoring your primaries, maybe even your secondaries. Also, you can't fall back without doing a desperate escape test, so a third of a chance of losing a model, and you can't use stratagems on that unit, which could be a key thing too. So Battleshock, for me, is going to be huge. It's going to be huge, and it's done in your command phase as well, don't forget. Now, unfortunately for Necrons, our leadership looks like it's a 7+, which looks like it's a standard sort of leadership now. And oddly, the Space Marines have got a 6+, so they've in fact got a better leadership than the Necrons did, and we've been known for having the best leadership in the game, or one of, apart from, Custodians have a better leadership. But we've always had that leadership value of a 10. We very rarely fail leadership. So we're going to have to bear that in mind. We could still be failing that leadership and those Battleshock tests. And that's going to affect us with point scoring, which is, or was, one of our strong suits. Next, I've got something that isn't as relatable to Necrons, but we will be on the brunt end of it, I suppose. It's the psychic attacks. Now, thankfully, these psychic attacks don't happen in a psychic phase anymore, because there is no psychic phase, which is a good thing, because we didn't have any way of dealing with psychic attacks unless we were the Zerican dynasty, or we had the Silent King, or Gloom Prisms from the Spiders, Luminosaurus perhaps, but we didn't really have a way of nullifying Psykers. Psykers normally can deny the witch against other Psykers. We didn't have that. However, now the psychic attacks happen in other phases, so most of them happen in the shooting phase if they're Witchfire attacks. And in fact, we'll show you this screen here with this Space Marine Librarian in Terminator armor. You can see his Smite attack is just a shooting attack now. Force Weapon also has the psychic keyword attached to it. That's not really a psychic attack. And also it's an ability, Veil of Time on the right there, as you can see. The sustain what hits one ability is a psychic thing now. They don't have to roll for it, which is obviously not good for us. They just get it for free now. There's no rolling for it, there's no perils of the warp, so there's no sort of negatives to having those psychic abilities, psychic tests, because there isn't any. But they do work in the same way as if they were firing a shooting attack or a shooting weapon, because things such as characters can go in, characters go in units, which is another topic for this video. Characters can go in units so they can hide, whereas with some psychic attacks in the 9th edition, you can still target characters and still get the mortal wounds on the characters regardless of where they're positioned on the battlefield. So this is in a way a good thing for Necrons. Also, you've got to remember that this is going to save time. You've not got an entire psychic phase to deal with, where Necron players were literally just looking at their phone because we didn't have anything to do apart from take mortal wound damage, right? And we couldn't even reanimate from it from 9th edition. That has completely been bypassed now, and we're going straight into the shooting phase, which is obviously good. Another massive thing now, we've already kind of alluded to it already, it's objective control. Objective control is one of those stats that we mentioned earlier in this video, one of the new stats. Now, it doesn't just relate to infantry and stuff like that. Our monolith, for example, as you can see in the image here, it's got objective control 8. So if we can park a Necron monolith on an objective, we will be classed as having 8 objective control points on that objective, which is quite hard to shift. They're going to need to beat 8 in order to take the objective from us. They were trying to do this in 9th edition, especially with, I think it was Tyrannies, where they were counting them as 5 models when determining control of an objective and things like that. I think it did work out for the game, so they brought it back into the the mainstream of the game itself. Everybody's got objective control, no matter what kind of unit you are, whether you're a vehicle, Titanic, doesn't matter, objective control, you've got it. But I definitely will give this a thumbs up. I do like the idea of this. Again, having objective secured, I just hated the idea of that, it just didn't make any sense. But as we've spoken about that already previously in this video, let's move on to the next one, Streamlined faction rules. Now this one I really love. You've seen this from the Warhammer community articles that they've been previewing on a daily basis on the weekdays. They've given you effectively an army rule, you then get a detachment rule, and that's pretty much it. In fact, you get some stratagems. I think you get 6 stratagems that go to that detachment. Then they'll give you certain extras that are going to replace relics and warlord traits that will go for that detachment only. Now with our index release, we're going to only have that one detachment, which is the Awakened Dynasty. So that Awakened Dynasty will have 6 unique stratagems available to that detachment, and only a certain amount of things that are going to replace warlord traits and relics. Now once we do get our Necron Codex, there should be more dynasties. It won't be like the Mephit Dynasty and the Nova Dynasty and all that. There'll be completely new named ones, and they'll have a unique ability and unique stratagems. But again, I like this because in 9th edition it was a bit of a mess, I believe. I think it was just way too open. Like when I was doing Know Your Foe videos, I remember doing one of the early ones, Drukhari I believe it was, and it took me about 2 weeks to do that video because I don't really come across Drukhari that often. I don't know Drukhari that well. I don't play Drukhari, of course. So sort of having to learn this codex and learning the ins and outs of the codex and all the combinations and everything to do with the codex, it was an absolute mission. It was because you can literally mix and match virtually any stratagem from, you know, a 4-page stratagem list, any relic from an entire page of relics, any warlord trait from an entire warlord trait. I mean, thankfully, there wasn't any psychic stuff in there. That would have made it even more difficult. But then you've got the units and then your combinations of all the units as well. It just made it very difficult. Whereas now with this streamlined version, like I said, you've got your faction rule. You then choose your detachment. We've only got one at the moment. You choose your detachment and you get your detachment rule. And that comes with 6 stratagems, a couple of things that you add. I can't remember what they call them. It's not relics anymore, is it? It's something else. But you've basically got a small selection of those. Job done. So if you were to go back to Drukhari and you see their index and you see their detachment rule and their faction rule, instantly you can see it on one A4 paper. You can go, right, that's what you've got, that's what you've got, that's what you're able to do with stratagems. That's all I need to know. I don't need to revise that entire codex and spend time on it and go, damn, what could he potentially do, or what could they potentially do, what could they pull out the bag, what's the gotcha moments. All that's gone, and I absolutely love that. So that one, for me, it's probably one of the biggest thumbs up of 10th edition. Another big change for 10th edition is the monsters and vehicles for numerous reasons. First of all, monsters and vehicles can now be shot even though they're in engagement range. That's pretty good and also pretty bad. Now, I don't mean that in terms of 10th edition, I just mean for Necrons. Like, for example, we were able to hide our command barges, our Nightbringers, our Silent King. We were able to hide them within engagement range so they couldn't be shot unless your opponent falls back and then decides to shoot everything into them, but they've fallen back by that stage. And if you were able to lock one model in when you're doing your pile-ins and stuff, they weren't able to fall back without doing a desperate breakout. So there were sort of tricks to that, but now they can be shot. And I'm a little bit worried, in fact, for the Catan Shards, because they sort of needed a little bit of survivability to get to where they want to go, and then do what they want to do kind of thing. But no, they can be shot even though they're in engagement range. Now, thankfully, they have fixed something that was on my wish list, in fact, which was the toughness needs to have gone up, and it has. So they've showcased the monolith, so I'm going to go back to the monolith. The monolith was toughness 8, it's now toughness 14. So we've seen vehicles as well as monsters have gone up massively in toughness. It kind of feels like the old editions where we had the rear facing, front facing, all that jazz, and we were 14 was the good one, wasn't it? 14 was the big Land Raider style toughnesses, and we've got that with our monolith. Now that unfortunately also means that weapon strength has also gone up on the bigger and badder weapons, and we've seen it from the railgun, we've seen it from numerous weapons that they've previewed from the Warhammer community articles, and unfortunately I'm looking at the Necron stuff and I'm not seeing much in terms of high strength, high damage. So we've had the Void Dragon, which was d6 plus 2 damage, it was strength 12. We've had the Doomsday Cannon, okay, that was strength 15, not bad, but damage 4. It's not exactly those, those big damages that we've seen in previous articles. There was some damage 12 stuff. So I'm kind of wondering, where is our damage going to come from? I'm really hoping that the Locust Heavy Destroyers are going to be another one for this edition. But I do like the changes to this. I think it's much better for the game because in 9th edition, it was just a sheer amount of fire, sheer amount of shots could take down a standard vehicle. Like if you had, I don't know, 40 bolt gun shots firing at a vehicle, it did a fair amount of work on it, whereas that shouldn't be the case. Bolt gun fire should just be bouncing off of monoliths, should be bouncing off of Land Raiders, not taking it down and literally removing it from the battlefield. So that is a good change. At the same time, I've got to think of it on the other foot here. Like, what if you've only got a certain amount of big guns and your opponent takes them out early? Then what are you going to use? What are you going to be able to use to kill a Land Raider, for example? Whereas, like I said, in 9th edition, you could still take out a Land Raider with the weaker weapons. It looks like in 10th edition, we're probably not going to be able to do that. We're going to need our heavier stuff. So are we going to need to have more heavier stuff in our list? Or are we going to have to protect them better? Are we going to be gunning for our opponent's heavy stuff very early on and ignore everything else? Is it going to be that kind of game? In fact, is the game going to benefit a shooty army such as Tau, Astra Militarum? Are they going to be the top tier armies of 10th edition? Maybe the melee faction is going to not do as well. We don't really know. So I think the heavy hitters are going to be massive for 10th edition, and we're going to have to work out a way of protecting ours. Another very welcome change is no detachment chart. In the previous edition, we had all the battalion detachments, the brigade, patrol. We then went on to the later stages of the Arcs of Omen detachments, where we had restrictions of how we could build our lists. Now, in Arcs of Omen, we needed 3 units that were within a certain battlefield role. So, for example, if we chose elites, we needed at least 3 elites, and then everything else could be as it is. Sometimes that messes up your game, sometimes it didn't. I mean, I like to play incursion level games because it's just quick and easy and you can just set it up, not a problem. It's very fast to get on with. And I found, before the Arcs of Omen, in fact, when it was the patrol detachments, you were limited to having 2 units of the same datasheet name. That made list building quite difficult. And then when the Arcs of Omen came about, that also was difficult, but on a different level, because now you needed 3 of the same battlefield role as well. So it was, when you've only got 1,000 points to play with, it was quite difficult to do that. But having this new system here where you literally just pick a character, that's going to be your warlord. You can have up to 3 of the same datasheet and up to 6 of the same battle line, and that's the only restrictions you've got. There's nothing more to it. So it's a lot more expansive. There is no heavy support anymore. There is no fast attack. Of course, in your mind, you can class things as, Tomb Blades are still fast attack in your brain. That's fine. They are now just units. It's as simple as that. They are now just units, and that's how you need to treat them. But I like that. Definitely makes the game more expansive in terms of list building. And in fact, for me personally, I find list building really fun. It's probably the best part of the game for me. That might sound really boring. I love building lists. That's just something I really love doing. Another huge change is the core stratagems. Now, in fact, we did a video only recently. I've gone through the core stratagems. I still think I've missed one, guys. I don't know if I've missed one or not. I did 11. I think there was only 11 in the leak. But I went through the Necron specific one as well that they showcased. So if you've missed that video, I'll put it in the... Where will I put it? It'll be on the playlist somewhere, or you'll find it on the channel. But yeah, we've gone through all the stratagems and how they relate to Necrons. But I like the idea that there's more stratagems to play with, in terms of core stratagems that everybody could use. So we are going to be more in tune with what your opponent is going to do. If they're going to go for the epic challenge stratagem, we know all about it. It's not a surprise to us when they say, I'm going to do this. Whereas if you're going up in 9th edition and they pull out some random stratagem and you go, what does that do? I don't know what that does. And then they tell you what it does and you just go, geez, that's kind of good. I didn't expect that to come out, but... Now it's a little bit more simplified and you kind of know what to expect. So yeah, definitely another thumbs up there. Next topic is leaders. Well, leaders and attached units, because in this edition we are now putting our characters back into units if they've got the leader keyword, which is a core universal word. I like this. I used to like this in the old editions. I always get them mixed up. Was it 7th or 8th edition where you could do this? I really liked it, although you did start to get these Death Star units, because at that time you could put characters with other characters and just make one character-sized unit, and it was mega. But nowadays, you're sticking, in 10th edition, you're sticking a leader in a unit that allows it to be in that unit. It's effectively going to work as a new Lookout Sir ability, but also that leader is giving the buffs to that said unit. I like that. I definitely like that. It makes more sense. And for Necrons specifically, we've got that in place with our detachment rule. Again, the Awakened Dynasty is if a Necron character is within a unit, it's a +1 to the hit roll. Has this replaced the My Will Be Done ability? Maybe. Maybe we're still going to get the My Will Be Done ability. Maybe it affects the ballistic skill and weapon skill. We don't know. But as for the actual detachment rule, that's what we've got. Now they showcased this in the Space Marines preview with the Primaris Lieutenant with the leader keyword, and it shows in fact what units this lieutenant can go in. So it can go into the Assault Intercessors, Blade Guard Veterans, Hellblasters, Intercessors, and there's a couple there that have not disclosed yet. And then it also showed on the right hand side there what ability it's going to give that specific unit. So it gave them all the lethal hits ability as well as the ability to shoot and declare a charge in the turn that it fell back. So there's going to be less auras in the game. I mean, there are still auras, but there's going to be less of them. They're going to be sort of for the epic heroes, really. But the smaller characters, such as a Royal Warden, perhaps, maybe your Technomancer, your Chronomancer, they're going to be within a unit now. I find that much better, because I was playing like that anyway. That's the way I used to play. I used to dedicate one unit to, say, the Technomancer. Again, I used to play smaller games, so it fitted the way I played. Now, there are going to be some lone operatives, though, some that do not go into units. I'd imagine all the Catan shards are going to be lone operatives. Potentially, like the Hexmark Destroyers. Not sure if they're going to get... They might not even get the character keyword, in fact. We don't know. But there are going to be some of those, and they've got their own unique rules as well. You've got to be within 12 inches to actually fire at them. But yeah, good changes all around there, I think. The grand reset of AP is the next subject I wanted to talk to you about today, and definitely a good thing. AP was absolutely wild at the end of 9th edition. Everything had AP. Nothing was resilient anymore. Well, in fact, no, take that back. Everything was resilient, or too resilient. Everything had in-run saves, but everything had IAP. But Necrons sort of didn't have either. We didn't really have the resiliency anymore, and we also didn't have that mega AP. So as you can see here from our Necron Warriors preview that they released, the Ghost Flayers used to be -1 AP and the Ghost Reapers used to be -2, and as you can see they've gone down 1 each. So the AP has been reset, definitely a good thing. The basic weapons in the game should not have high AP, they shouldn't have it. It was just too good. Especially when you can get these kind of models on the cheap in the game, and having multiple shots just going straight through armor just didn't make any sense. Save the AP for the big stuff, and they have done that. So yeah, another good change there. I just hope this is going to be faction wide. I think it will be. I think I've seen from most of the previews that most of the basic weapons have been nullified now. Save it for the bigger stuff. On to terrain next. Now terrain has been simplified-ish. I say ish, I'll get onto why in a minute, but the benefits of cover is just now light cover. There is no light cover, dense cover and all that jazz. It's just light cover, just a +1 to your armor save. Unless you've got an armor save of a 3+, you won't be getting the benefits of cover against 0 AP weapons, because they're basically stopping you from getting a 2+ armor save now. They're saving it for things that have a natural 2+ armor save. Again, I think that's a good thing. There was nothing worse than having, Space Marine Intercessors within cover, and it was they have a 2+ armor save. And units were just dotted around in terrain, just basically having this cover save. It was just annoying to deal with. And maybe we were doing it too with Immortals. Maybe we were doing it with Locust Destroyers. So we were also just as bad as other players here. But they've actually gotten rid of that now. You must have a 3+ armor save unless you've got a natural 2+. Now I said ish in terms of changes. Now there's still a lot of different types of terrain that are going to interact differently. For example, you've got craters and rubble that will affect infantry models that are wholly within it. They're going to gain the benefits of cover. Yep, that's okay, that's good. But then you come on to say ruins, and models that are wholly within a ruin, if they're 6 inches or more vertically from the ground level, they're going to get extra AP and things like that. I'm not really a big fan of stuff like that. I think that overcomplicates things. You've also got barricades and fuel pipes that's going to interact with charge moves and things like that. So there are still a few little more complicated areas of terrain. It's definitely been much more cleaned up than it was from 9th edition. 9th edition was supposed to be cleaned up, and maybe it was, but I still found it quite difficult. I mean, every game I played, every opponent seemed to have a different idea of how terrain worked, and it was kind of frustrating because I'm not saying I know every single rule at all times. I'm not a guru of the game. I do make mistakes as well, but it was like every single opponent was saying the complete opposite to the next one. And it just kind of was getting a bit tiresome, having to sort of agree on these terrain rules before the game started, which were not the same as my previous games. And if you're in like a league, for example, and you're playing different rules, it just didn't really feel balanced or correct. But, it is a game at the end of the day, and I was okay with doing that. So yeah, hopefully that has been cleaned up, and once we start playing, hopefully we'll work out if that actually has been cleaned up or not. The fight phase is next. There's not much of a thing to talk about here, apart from the fact that you must get into base to base where possible now. So in your charge move, you've got to get base to base, in your piling move, and in your consolidation moves. If you are able to get into base contact with your opponent's unit, you must. Simple as that. Before, we were doing this sort of merry-go-round. Now, of course, you can still do that in terms of piling in and consolidations. The units, or the models that are sort of your second rank, they're still going to do this merry-go-round thing going round and round. But your initial contact, your front line, they must get base to base. So that's going to stop this silly dance that we were doing in 9th edition to try and, we were trying to negotiate ground, get onto an objective and get into engagement range of a second unit that didn't want to get into a fight at all. And it was all a bit of a sticky mess, and I didn't really like that aspect of the game in 9th edition. It's still going to be there in some situations, but the fact that it's forcing us to get close to pile-in, I think that is much better. While we're on the topic of moving things around, well, moving through friendly models is now a thing, which is a good thing. And the amount of times I just sort of mismanaged my movement and I moved something first and I've gone, you know what, I've done this in the wrong order because now I've trapped my unit behind that model and I can't get them through. Now we're able to do that, and there are restrictions in terms of monster and vehicles. You can't do it for them. You can't move a vehicle or monster out the way, but everything else you can pretty much just imagine they weren't there. Almost like having the fly keyword. As long as you don't end your movement on top of your models, of course, you can still do that movement through your own models. Definitely welcoming that one. That one is going to save me a lot of hassle, because I was definitely one of those people that messed up the movement phase very early on. And then the final topic I wanted to talk about today is strategic reserves. Just a small thing here. I mean, we've always had a restriction on strategic reserves, and they've put a 25% budget, if you like, on how many models and units can go into reserves. So if you are playing a standard Strike Force game, a 2,000 point game, they are suggesting 500 points maximum can go into strategic reserves before battle, so that's 500 points, 25%. This can't include your fortifications or your... In fact, it's just fortifications, isn't it? Now, I can't remember if they've actually declared if the strategic reserves works in the same way as it did in 9th edition, where turn 3 you can do this and turn 4 you can do this. I'm not entirely sure if I've seen that yet. We'll have to wait and see. But so far, from all these changes that I've seen, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with what they've done. Now, of course, I've not had a single game of 10th edition. Like 99% of you guys, you've probably not played a game. You're waiting until 10th edition comes out, like I am. This could be a complete flop, but from everything we've seen so far, I'm really liking pretty much every change we've got going. The only things I've got, the only sort of downside to this is I still believe Necrons are not going to do well with this edition. I know it's too early to say that, but so far I've just not seen anything that makes me think Necrons are going to do good. We're not, in terms of leadership, we've not got the leadership anymore. In terms of objectives secured, we've not got that anymore. In terms of the damage, I know we've only seen 2 sort of damage profiles from the Monolith and the Void Dragon. None of them were that exciting. I mean, they were boosted from the previous edition, so we got a little bit excited about that. But when you started to look at other articles from other factions, they had so much more than we did. So what are we relying on is my question. Are we relying on the Nightbringer, the Silent King? What is it that's going to get us back on level terms with the rest of these factions? At the moment, I can't see it. Maybe it's points cost. That's the only thing that I can sort of cross my fingers about, our points cost being low. Maybe we turn into a Horde army. That's the only thing that we can really rely on. Otherwise, who knows? Who knows? We could be one of them bottom level kind of factions. But yeah, guys, that is it from me today. If you've got anything else to mention for this video, put it down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.